of times it's just sort of left to the contractor to figure out. And then you get on site to do that inspection and you kind of tell them, well, you did it wrong. Had there been a detail to show the person how to do it, then that would have avoided those issues.
Hello and welcome to our next episode of Haldimand and Norfolk County Real Estate Hacks. I'm your host, Adam Walker, your friend in the mortgage business, where my team and my preferred partners, we give you the local competitive advantage in today's real estate market. We'd love to help you out. We've got a great episode for you today, kind of continuing on our episode last week with Kim Ziegel, where she talked a lot about how to get the permit process and the permitting of, a lot of different things across Ontario, but specifically we talked about auxiliary dwelling units and how to build on that. And one of the suggestions Kim's had on was that we had to talk to this guy. We had to talk to our next guest. We had to talk to Justin. He's our expert when it comes to drawings, everything tiny home. I got some really good information that we're gonna have in the show notes in terms of Ontario tiny homes that he's building, designing. But welcome to the show, Justin. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit what you own. It's your drafting company. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yep. So I'm the owner of MW Drafting and Design. We're an architectural design firm located in Simcoe. From Norfolk County originally. Kind of did the typical thing. Spent some years away. I was a building inspector for the city of Kitchener, plans examiner for the city of Guelph. So I have a lot of experience specifically on the building code side. And I started MW Drafting Design probably about 9 years ago. And at the time it was operated as a sort of a side gig while I was an inspector. Right. The biggest thing I noticed being a plans examiner and inspector was the quality of drawings we were reviewing was often not great. So I really kind of thought, hey, I can help you out and do a better job. When I became an inspector, the biggest thing I noticed was at the inspection stage, you're just telling people what their problems are, right? You're just saying, hey, that was wrong. You got to fix this. I really wanted to be able to solve those problems before they become problems, really help people during the planning and design stage. So that's where MW really started picking up. And January 2020, yes, right before COVID, I decided to leave my secure municipal job and do the design business full time. So obviously it was a bit nerve-wracking at first, but everything's been great since then in terms of demand and how busy we are, which probably is why a lot of your listeners don't really know that I'm here. Need to do a bit of a better job of promoting myself locally, but we're just so busy that it hasn't really been a major problem. But I do want to do more local work. I want to be able to help, my fellow Norfolk and Haldimand constituents. But
yeah. Tell me a little bit. You'd say some of those problems that you ran into that you would see as a building inspector, where you're telling them, hey, you've got this wrong. What are some of the things that you come across?
The biggest thing is a lot of architectural designs will not focus on the details. It's kind of enough information to get your building permit, but not really enough to provide the necessary construction details to that person building it. So what would usually happen is very common thing is, your air barrier details, like how is your, 6 mil poly going to interface properly with other materials, other adjoining assemblies like floors and roofs and things like that. Right. So a lot of times it's just sort of left to the contractor to figure out. And then you get on site to do that inspection and you kind of tell them, well, you did it wrong. Had there been a detail to show the person how to do it, then that would have avoided those issues. So that's very common. Framing is a big one, really thinking about the framing. How is that going to work? We do all of our designs in Revit, which is a 3D based modeling program, very professional level program. Mm-hmm. So it allows us to build the house or building before it's even built in reality. So as long as it's constructed to the plans, everything's going to work out. We figured it out ahead of time. So that's really our difference. And I'd say those are the biggest things that as an inspector, is catching on site is those details. Lack of details on drawings leads to an open interpretation of how that actually works out on site.
Right. And I'm sure that now that being on the other side of this, that's got to be a huge time saver for for clients that when they are building that house of if you don't have the building inspector coming out multiple times, the building inspector's not always available. Hey, we're ready for you on Tuesday. They're not always available for you on Tuesday, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, you get that inspector out, maybe it's just a couple minor items and they're like, oh yeah, show me a picture of that blocking or something. But you
right.
can continue. That just saves your project, right? It saves the schedule, it saves you money. It avoids back charges and change orders and things like that when things can be identified ahead of time.
Right, right. So with the new zonings coming in, obviously you service it all. I've been on your website, you do all kinds of drafting for homes and everything, but specifically talking today about the auxiliary dwelling units or tiny homes or granny suites or garden suites, whatever the heck we want to call them. We want to call them everything under the sun. But how has that really changed? The framework of what we're doing here today, and how how popular have these become?
I would say that kind of to address your second question first, let's start with the easy one is popularity. Lots of interest, a lot of people really interested in thinking about doing it. Um, but in terms of actually uptake of completed projects, not as much as I think planners that created these bylaws and the province kind of pushing this to happen to help create those homes we need to build.
Right.
Um, I think that a lot of people up high are kind of wondering, oh, hold on, we changed these bylaws to allow people to do it. Why aren't we seeing as many?
Right.
And I think the big thing through my research is people will get to that planning stage and really kind of get the ball rolling, get that interest, and then get some roadblocks, get some unknowns, get some things that are causing them fear. And as we know from a consumer standpoint, if you have fear over a decision, you're not going to make that decision. So that's the biggest thing, that lack of information. Um, and could you repeat the first question for me as well?
No, that's a. I still want to build on that one there, though.
Perfect.
In terms of that, that was what's the fears? What do you see? And as somebody who's been through this, I can definitely see where it'd be enough to say throw in the towel because it's a lot of there's a lot of challenges that go into building one of these. What are some of the things that you see as those roadblocks, to entry, and how do you help with that?
Yeah, so it's really all about unknowns, right? So say maybe your project, for example, or say, using me as a hypothetical example, we want to put an ADU in the back of our property. Okay, what do we do first? Maybe we talk to a designer, maybe we talk to the county, maybe we talk to a contractor, but you're not getting the whole picture, right? So you're going to say, okay, well, what's it going to cost? That's probably the first thing I want to know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you talk to a contractor, maybe they give you some ballpark pricing, but then they tell you, well, that doesn't include your site servicing. What's your electrical like? What's your sewer like, or septic, or well, or water, and all those kind of things, right? So as soon as you're like, okay, now I got to gather these other quotes, I have to talk to these other professionals, that really starts kind of bogging down that process, right? It turns it into something that should be easy into complexity. And I think a lot of it is, unless you're highly motivated, you're not going to go through those steps. Other
right.
big thing is from a financing standpoint, people don't know, is this going to allow me, like, am I going to be able to do this from an affordability standpoint? What's the ROI look like? So that's the big fear that a lot of people have.
Hmm.
Um, I'd say those are the biggest things. And then just a general lack of understanding that you can do these things. We were at the Ontario Tiny Home Show in Ancaster last year, and I remember even having a customer come up to me from Norfolk County and said, it'd be great if we could do these in Norfolk. I explained, it's been on the bylaw for a couple of years now. Like, you can definitely do these in Norfolk. So that right there just kind of says a lot of lack of understanding, right? So
Right. So let's put this into play here. Where are you seeing these? Where would these be the most popular? Where's the best fit if I want a tiny home? Is it, are you seeing them in rental homes? Are you seeing them for aging parents? Are you seeing them for, kids that are, maybe hitting 19, 20 years old and don't have, can't move out yet because the housing market's too pricey? Or maybe a little bit of all of the above?
yeah, I would say definitely a little bit of all of the above. and you can break it down in those categories. I say you have talking about one unique category that's been coming up a lot in our rural municipality is people on, say, agricultural land. So they have a house, they have some acres, they want to have that ADU, but you've got some space. You almost want it to be like another house, right? Maybe the kids have moved into the main house, they're
Yeah.
starting a family, you've moved out to an ADU, but you want some space. You still want to enjoy your farm property that you worked hard on all these years, right? So that's one category that we're seeing a lot of from the homeowner standpoint. The other category is parents looking for a place for their kids, full well knowing they need a place to start, but they don't have, they're not going to just go buy a house or even paying rent. Things like that are challenging. So having that ADU for the 19-20-year-old kids, like you said, is a great starting place. We see a lot there. And then aging in place is the other category, like you mentioned. There's a lot of interest there on people putting one of these on their property for their parents, keep their parents close by, keeps them out of retirement homes or nursing homes until a lot later. So that's just great for everybody. It really creates versatility. Now, in all these scenarios, it's not um, it's not for somebody that's starting, say, buying their first home. So
Right.
all these scenarios, they're either rentals or they're provided by family. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of traction on in this is a bit of a slower moving thing to start is tiny home communities. So
Right.
places where people can actually have an asset, like it's a condo or something like that, so they can own something to start.
Right.
So we're seeing a lot of traction there. I'm working on some developments where we're looking to get funding from CMHC, get municipalities on board to help us access land that they own to build
Right.
these communities. So they're really well planned, great communities so people can own a home and start. So those are the different categories that we're seeing this
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, what about you? You kind of mentioned the investor there. What about are you seeing a lot of this? Even the tiny home or the auxiliary dwelling unit as a second base. We always say that the best investment obviously would be the duplex, the triplex when you're getting into multiple doors and multiple rental units. I think one of the biggest untapped markets might be that investor that if you're buying, you're looking for that home, rather than having a single income, but having that secondary income, it works out positive for both ways. One, you've got a second income. Two, you're providing housing for, for more families, right? Are you seeing a lot of that starting to uptick yet? What's the benefits for an investor to build this?
Yeah, it's a great way to add, one more door to a property, right? With Bill 23 passing, every essential, a detached home that's on municipal services, so you have access to a sewer, you have access to water,
Right.
by right can have 3 dwellings. So you've got a typical scenario now is you've got a basement apartment and then the main house, right? As a real estate investor, people have been doing that for a long time. Now adding that third unit just further maximizes the property. So we are working with investor clients as well to do that, basically just maximize properties they either already own or they're full on purchasing properties now with the intention of doing this, which definitely plays into know when you're looking at a property, know the zoning and know what it can do and how that ADU is going to work.
Right. So what does your typical property look like? So if you're not your typical property, what does your ideal property look like? If you were an investor today and you're going to buy that property and it's got one rental income right now and we want to turn it into three rental incomes. Are we looking for something with a separate entrance to the basement? Are we looking for something with a yard for a tiny home? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, I would say the ideal scenario is number one. It's hard to think about this first, but you really need just parking. That's a really difficult thing to get
Right.
around if you don't have parking. So most municipalities are going to require one parking space per dwelling unit. That is sort of the provincially regulated maximum that they can ask for now.
Yeah.
Um, so to keep it in the Norfolk context specific, like that's what they're looking for is one
Right.
parking space per dwelling. So looking at that, so like a large enough driveway that like a double car driveway would be great with a parking spot in a garage, and
Mhm.
you'd be set. So that would solve your parking. The other item there would be access to the basement. Having a separate entrance isn't technically required by building code or anything like that. You can
Right.
share an entrance, but from a marketability standpoint, getting good tenants to live there and stay, they're going to want their own entrance. So
Right.
anything where the stairs are on the side of the house, something like that, where an extra entrance could be brought, cut into the side of the building, if it's not there already, would be a
Right.
great opportunity. Ceiling height in the basement is key. Make sure you've got 6'5" to the underside of your ductwork and beams, and you're not going to have any problems. That's one of the bigger things we run into with the secondary units in
Right.
terms of usability.
Yeah.
And then as far as the backyard is concerned, you do want some kind of separate access to the backyard through a gate or something like that. These ADUs really are seen like a separate house when it comes to some building code requirements, like access for firefighters. So if there's a fire in that ADU or someone needed help, emergency services need access. So some kind of access through the side of the property to that ADU.
Right.
And some kind of amenity space for the ADU, like a yard of their own kind of thing. Good way of
Right.
looking at it. And yeah, sufficient space to put those ADUs in.
So what are we looking for when you want to talk space for that backyard ADU? What kind of space are we looking for?
So a typical ADU that's, I'd say, on the popular side of things is around 400 square feet in
Okay.
area. That number ties into a new building code provision where you can manufacture a tiny home in one location and get building inspections there, ship it to another location and get the building inspections for the foundation, site servicing, things like that. So we are seeing a crop of tiny home builders coming on board to work under this new provision because they can sort of build these in a factory environment, which
Right.
wasn't readily available to them before. There were mechanisms previous, but it was expensive, cost prohibitive for tiny homes.
Right.
So that's something you're going to be you're going to see a lot of 396 square foot tiny homes because that's right under the limit of that 37 square meters that the building code permits for this type of construction. So having said that, you want an area that's going to fit that,
Yes.
and then dealing with setbacks. And then obviously that's municipality specific as to what those setbacks are. Generally, they're pretty permissive for those setbacks. Having said that, windows and openings in the ADU are going to limit how close you can be to a property line. So you do want a bit of space there.
Right.
I wouldn't think about just being right on the limit. I would kind of give you some buffer, especially based on the design you're interested in. And that's pretty much it. So I think a typical like nice size backyard, probably in an older neighborhood, your 1960s, 1970s kind of neighborhoods,
Yes.
are going to be great opportunities for ADUs.
Yeah, no, and they probably typically those yards have the second, the side entrance plus the front door entrance, right? You've got a lot of those side splits, back splits, and those
Exactly.
that kind of fit into that perfectly. Now, okay, we're gonna scare some people. 400 square feet tiny home. What are we involving in that? What is that gonna look like for me?
Yeah, so that's going to give you a small combined living space where you've got a very efficient kitchen with great appliance layout. Um, Depending on the design, you're going to some models that have a very conventional kitchen. There might be, a standalone apartment size electric stove, like a 24-inch apartment size fridge. But you can also get pretty creative too, and getting your combination over the range microwave and convection oven is a great option for your space savings.
Yeah.
Combine that with an induction cooktop, and now you've got all of that storage space that was normally used by your range as storage space.
Right.
Obviously, a fairly standard size sink because you're living in it. You don't want
Yeah.
like a little
Yeah.
tiny bar sink.
Yeah.
And then your normal size fridge. You just shop more regularly, right? That's not a huge thing.
Yeah.
These are short on storage, so it is very much you don't have the big pantry for your Costco runs of
Right.
big giant
Right.
toilet paper rolls or anything
Yeah.
like that. So and then also in your living space, you've got some kind of a couch, your TV against the wall. That's pretty much what you're going to have. So it's a very efficient, very good space. A lot of times you have a fold down table, something like that that can work as your dining table and your desk as a combination.
Yeah.
Your bedroom space is going to typically be a Murphy bed is a great idea, and most all of our designs have a Murphy bed in them. But I definitely look for that because that gives you the versatility, right? Now you're folding your bed up and then you're using this space for other things. Maybe you're working out, doing your yoga. Maybe you've got your little home office in that spot too.
Right. Right.
And as far as bathrooms go, pretty typical bathroom layout. Again, just a bit more efficient use on space. Not a lot of these have full size tubs, which definitely makes it challenging for families. But you know, a lot of these 400 square foot ones are really obviously targeted to more individuals.
Right. Right.
On the point of the square footage too, Norfolk does allow it to be up to 807 square feet. So you can get larger ones,
Right.
but your typical is it's difficult. The height is also an issue as well. These are all one-story buildings. Any zoning for these in urban areas only allows for one story. They don't want, you know, you put a two-story house right beside your fence basically so you can look at the neighbors is
Right. Right.
the reason
That's
for
fair.
that.
That's fair.
And laundry facilities is the other thing is heat pump washer dryers are really the way to go. So it's like
Okay.
your washer and dryer all in one unit. There's no high voltage for it, and there's no exhaust that needs to go outside. So they work really well. They're basically the size of a conventional front load washer, but it does both your washing and drying in one. So we usually put those in the kitchen underneath the counter.
Right.
Sometimes you get them in the bathroom as well, depending on layout. So
That's awesome. So, okay, so now let's talk costs. What, obviously these are going to be different depending on finishes and a lot of different things. But if I wanted to, so let's say I was out looking for a rental property this weekend and I came across something that I can convert, a basement and I can add an AD. What's, or a tiny home out back, what are we looking at in terms of costs, kind of, like I said, obviously there's a big range
yep,
there, but what do
it does
low end
range.
to high end, what are we kind of looking at?
Yeah, like I would say that this is where people kind of go like get a bit of sticker shock. Because when you talk like cost per square foot numbers with conventional construction, you know, maybe on the really cheap end, you're at $300 a square foot to 350 and up, right? Obviously for a custom home, you know, a tiny house, your cost per square foot is a lot higher because you
Right,
have things like your kitchen and your bathroom, which are normally high cost per square foot areas. Now those areas are like half your house.
right,
So,
right,
you know, 500, 600, $700 a square foot is not typical. I usually tell people if it's one of these factory kind of like 400 square foot tiny home ready to go, like plop down on your land, you're going to be spending at least $200,000 on
right.
something like that.
Yeah.
For sure, if it's a site built tiny home, maybe you can get a very specific contractor to do it, maybe a little bit cheaper, but I think generally that's what you're looking at. And a lot of these clients of ours that are builders, they're building in these factories are trying their best to get those efficiencies in place, hence the factory building, to get
Mhm.
those costs down. So I would think that a site built tiny home would probably cost a bit more than that,
Right.
especially with all the logistics involved. In addition to those costs, you have your site servicing. So this is super, super site specific dependent.
Yeah.
Depending on the electrical situation, depends on the plumbing, you know, do you need to upgrade your services? But say if you need to upgrade your water, your sewer, do an electrical panel upgrade to 200 amp, bring the service back to the tiny home, you're probably looking at $25,000 for that type of work.
Mhm.
And that would be like on an urban type lot.
Right.
So, you know, budget wise, you know, 250,000, something like that. You've got one in your yard, which, you know, to have a whole dwelling unit where it's rented out or something like
Yeah.
that's not bad.
Absolutely, and I think that's what that's a big thing. You see a lot of these smart investors that are looking at these opportunities of, if you can get an extra door for $250,000 that you're going to be collecting rent on, any rent, rents are going through the roof. When you're looking at an average home being 25 to $2,700 a month in rent, you're probably not going to get that for a tiny home, but you're still generating a pretty darn good return on investment when it comes to that tiny home. And then converting, if you can convert a basement Obviously the costs on that probably aren't going to be as high as building a brand new unit, but definitely some huge advantages there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. No, awesome. What are some tips maybe for some buyers that are interested in these? What are some tips that you would give to somebody that's starting to inquire?
Yeah, I would say a big tip would be to work with, like if it's a custom design, work with a designer that understands tiny homes. We've spent the last 2.5, almost 3 years now educating ourselves specifically in the tiny home space. We've engaged with a consultant, Bianca at the Giving Tree, and she's great for somebody that's really looking into their lifestyle changes that are required for this type of living. So say if it's a downsizing situation, or say if it's a young person like moving into this place, their parents' backyard,
Yeah.
she's a great person to start with to really get your mind wrapped around the downsizing aspect of it and
Right.
like how to live efficiently like that. So using those conversations with that clients have with her is usually what informs our designs. So
Right.
all of our stock plans are done with her input and advice, and any custom work we do, we usually get her involved as well because we really like it down to where you put your keys when you come home from work and doing
Yeah.
all those kind of things.
Yeah.
And she lives it. She lives in a tiny home, so she gets it.
Yeah.
And so she's a great resource. So I'd say that's your first step, is really being like, okay, what does that mean for me in terms of downsizing, in terms of how I'm going to live a little bit differently, how I'm going to live a little more sustainably, which has advantages too. The stress of mortgage rates and things like that are a lot less applicable to somebody that maybe doesn't have a mortgage because they just bought it free and clear with
Right.
equity or something they had in a
Right.
sale of a home. So I'd say that's where you want to start. Second from that, does the designer understand the process? Is the designer going to help you through the entire process? Are they just going to do drawings and you're going to go to a contractor and then now deal with all the permits and site servicing constraints and things like that? Or is your designer going to help you through the entire process?
Right.
Um,
Right.
we have recently started a process where we'll do like an initial site suitability study for your site. We'll go through everything from a zoning standpoint, building code constraints, all of those type of things, getting you estimating on site servicing so
Yeah.
that you can combine that and know all of everything that's involved, and combine that with your build cost to really kind of come up with, hey, what's the cost going to look like? We'll even help you find resources like dealing with mortgage companies that are amiable to these kind of developments, helping you through the entire process. So as far as questions, it's kind of general,
Yeah.
other than the like, hey, are you going to get me through this entire process?
Absolutely.
Have you done this before?
Yeah.
That's really the biggest thing I would say.
No, so much great information here today. I really, really appreciate you joining me. I think there's such a great opportunity for those that are looking to buy these. Especially when it comes to investors or like I said, the parents aging in place or getting in for the kids. So many great opportunities. So, your website. Talk a little bit about your website because I know if you're thinking about this tiny home, you've got some of those designs on there. Take us through a little bit of what's your best strategy to look through these and kind of come through and have a good idea of what this tiny home might look like? Because I know if you had told me 400 square feet, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you actually see some of the layouts on your website, they do a really good job.
Yeah, and when you're in these too, like usually ceilings are a bit taller, lots of windows, so all
Yeah.
those things really help to really make the space feel taller. So if you do go to our website, ontariotinyhomeplans.ca, we have a listing of stock plans that are available for purchase immediately. So
Right.
what that gets you is for ranging in price, starting at $695, you get a stock plan which is stamped construction drawings. You can go get a building permit with plans. So by purchasing those, we work with you to do a site plan. We'll get any site specific information on those drawings that you need for your building permit. If you need an HVAC design, we can coordinate that with you as well. If you do need engineering, we can coordinate that as well. Our plans that we have on there right now. Most of them don't require a separate engineering stamp or anything like that.
Right.
It's just done by us. So it really gets you ready to permit with those stock plans. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, and we do custom as well. So we have a lot of customers that say, "Oh, I like this about your model, but I want it a little bigger, or I want it laid out a little differently, or something like that." So it's a great starting point because it's very cost effective. Obviously, if we can start with something and modify and things like that as we go. So purchasing a stock plan gets you those stamp construction drawings right away.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, check it out. Like I said, Ontario Tiny Home Plans. I spent a lot of time on there, just kind of going through them. It's really really unique. It's really cool. And I know my process when I did mine was for the drawings was a much longer process. And if you can get something right away, it helps get that permit process going. I know everybody loves to complain about the county, but I said when I submitted my plans, I had my plans back in 3 days. Right, I had my permits back in 3 days from the time I submitted everything. Now, I made a lot of mistakes leading up to that, where it took me 8 or 9 months to get to a stage where I could submit my plans. But by working with with our partners here, like Kim, we talked to you last week, and like Justin here, there's so many opportunities. So again, thanks so much for joining us today. But before we finish, we got to promote a little bit of local. What's your favorite thing to do in Norfolk County here?
Favorite thing to do? Well, as a busy business owner and father of a 2-year-old, I don't get out a lot, but when I do, I definitely like to pop over to Catherwood in my local hamlet of Victoria and get some
Nice.
Catherwood in the kiln,
Killing,
some
yeah.
pizza from there. Um, Other than that, we do love going out to Sandbar on the beach, and Turkey Point is a big thing for us, especially with nice weather coming, getting on the
Yeah.
patio.
Yeah.
I'd say those are pretty big things that we can do right now as a family with how busy everything is.
Yeah, awesome. What's your favorite local festival?
Favorite local festival, Norfolk County Fair, definitely. We love making sure we fit in some fair time, even if we're away for a little bit of it or something like
Yeah,
that. We always go back for the fair.
yeah. What about for a cup of coffee if you're going for a little, a nice cafe? So, or where do you like to go for a cup of coffee?
Well, right around the corner from our office is Joy's. So it's very often that you'll see somebody, pop into Slack and say, "Hey, I'm going to Joy's. And we want anything?" And yeah, usually it's the black peanut cookie or a ginger cookie and a large coffee. That's pretty common.
Nice, nice, nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And we appreciate having you on.
Thank you, Adam.